All right, I want to thank everybody for joining. I see we have a nice crowd in the Zoom audience, and we've also got about a dozen folks here. A nice mix of undergraduate history BAs and history MA students. I'm very, very grateful to our guests for joining us, and I think that's the reason everybody's here. So I'm going to get out of the way in just a second. We're going to hear today from three museum professionals about work in the museum. We're going to hear first from Sara Mercado, who is Registrar in the San Bernardino County Museum. Then Jennifer Dickerson, who is Curatorial Services Manager at the Museum of Riverside. And then David Myers, who's Director of the San Bernardino County Museum. But first, to kick off this Careers for Historians session, I want to ask Lauren Williams, who is a career counselor in our Career Center here at CSUSB, to talk a little bit about the CSUSB Career Center and the services that are on offer there. So Lauren, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Before I do, I noticed that screen sharing is disabled.
Let me fix that right now.
Thank you.
There you go. You should be able to share.
Awesome. Thank you. Alrighty, folks, so I'll go ahead and begin. So thank you for inviting me to your space. Like Professor Murray had just introduced, my name is Lauren. I'm one of the counselors from the Career Center. So just very briefly, just talk about some of our services, purpose, maybe goals for you all that are joining us today. So I can't talk about the Career Center, of course, without talking about career readiness, right? Maybe one of our goals in joining university in general, right? Maybe that's why you chose history as your major, because something resonated in with you, right? To maybe work in careers within history, right? But first, backpedal and let's talk about career readiness, because that's what university is giving us. Yes, the Career Center is to help you become career ready, but also to make you aware about what career readiness is and how we can intentionally prepare ourselves with that. So you don't need to memorize these 8 competencies, but we, the Career Center, we follow an association called the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And what they do is provide lots of stats, professional development, and what it means between employers and bridging the gap between young emerging talent such as yourselves, right? So they identify what these competencies look like in the sense that build your career readiness. So it, of course, tops off with self-development, right? As far as like career goals. So what is it that you would like to do essentially, right? So some of the things that maybe we'll talk about today. But of course, we have some other competencies, some of which that you are building in the classroom and some of which that you do have to go out and seek, such as volunteering or internships, right? So I'll get a little bit more into that on how you can seek and also find for that too as well. But over in your career capitals really quick, right? What I really want you to kind of maybe memorize, if you will, is the 3 capitals, the knowing why, which is your motivation, what literally gets you maybe motivated to get out of bed out in the morning and do that line of work, right? Or the knowing how, the skills, the expertise that you have to offer. Of course, knowledge from the classroom, but also skills that you're building outside of that classroom too as well as the knowing whom. So your professional networks, because they can give you what is called the tap into the unseen job market, or the hidden job market, that is what's called, to tap into those unseen opportunities, right? As well as give you those recommendations, those referrals, right? So there's power in your networks, right? So all of these 3 career capitals is essentially what the Career Center is equipping you with, as well as making you aware of how you can intentfully, again, build upon your career readiness too. So the next maybe chart just shows, or slide just shows a little bit of what it's meaning to develop a professional development plan with your academic plan. So of course I meet with students that maybe sometimes confuse us with academic planning or academic advising department, which yes, you do have to set your classes every semester, totally understand that. But at the same time, you should be developing your professional plan. And of course you can come to the Career Center, we can help you out as far as what you can be doing to maximize your time here at university, right? But here's just a guideline, right? Maybe as freshmen, you're exploring different volunteering, maybe organizations that you can be aware of, and of course, just learning the way of the campus, right? College life. And then you're going into sophomore year, which maybe you adapt a little bit more. You're familiar with the campus a little bit more, but as you see in the professional development plan with your academic plan at the same time, you are not only just working on your classes, but as well as those other experiential opportunities or experiences, right? So as you can see here, internships, even going to conferences. And now I don't say to students, maybe if you're a junior or a senior and you haven't participated in an internship yet, you are not late to the game or anything that nature. This is just a guideline and helping to students understand when they can be working on their professional development in tandem with your academic levels too. But also at the same note, I like to say I have seen freshmen and sophomores participate in internships too. So don't let this be a guide to be like, well, I have to wait for opportunities. No, you can definitely be the initiative for what those opportunities look like. And also speaking of, right, talking about maybe even the services starting from your own college, SBS. So of course we have the Student Success workshop, Student Success Center workshop series. The first two, actually, I led the resume and interviewing, but you also have the career fair that's coming up actually next week, March 6th. And then you will have preparatory workshops. So if you've never been to a career fair before, right? Don't worry, I got you. So next we got resume review as well as networking, how to navigate, if you will, when it comes to a career fair. And of course, we at the Career Center have our own workshops for you along with your career readiness. So we actually build our workshops off of those NACE competencies that I just quickly talked about before, right? So of course, we talk about job searching, resume building, interviewing prep, right? As well as salary negotiation, right? A lot of things that maybe some of us don't think about until we're like, oh, I have to be mid-professional to salary negotiate. You can salary negotiate at any level. It's just a matter of how and what you say. So of course, join us for that if you're not aware of or would like some more strategies for that too. And of course, we have our own more career fairs coming up this spring. I'm going to bring us back to our website to show you a little bit more, but not only is SBS having a career fair, but we have our own career fair. And I believe the College of Arts, as well as education, is putting on lots of career fairs. So there's lots of opportunities that are flying around right now, especially this semester, at least when it comes to career fairs. And of course, we have career drop-ins. So we at the Career Center have our own career drop-ins, but I come to the SBS, to the Student Success Center, and I host career drop-ins in your space on Wednesdays. So if you're like, I need some help or I need some quick maybe advice to my resume or maybe how to interview, anything career related, you can come and of course talk to me during those drop-ins too. Okay, so now I did a little bit spiel of our upcoming events, as well as a little bit of the just kind of like our purpose, Career Center. I'm going to take us to our website just to show you some of our services as well as the tips and resources that you can tap into today. So I'm going to do a new share. There we go. Okay, so what we're all looking at right now is the Career Center's website. So at the homepage, you can see is our drop-ins at the Career Center. So we have them both virtually and in person every day except for Friday. So it's Monday through Thursday. Literally, you can come and see us and ask any questions without an appointment, even though you can make an appointment with us too as well, but you don't have to in order to kind of at least talk to us and get any maybe urgent questions that you need to. But I'm going to jump us over to events really quick so you can see, again, at glance, all of the wonderful employment opportunities that we have coming up for you, as well as the different events. Oh, we even have employer showcases. I forgot to mention that too. So aside from career fairs and different events, we will invite separate employers to come and present in what we call employer showcases. In fact, we have one tomorrow from the Federal Reserve Board that have different opportunities for students. So just maybe overviewing a little bit of that, but main services or resources is going to be found here in career resources. So you can see at glance, all of our maybe major topics that we assist you in. Of course, you can schedule appointments in with us too. And then if you go over, like maybe some example, I won't go over every single website. It's a little bit more straightforward, but there are some I do want to highlight, such as our clothing resources. Just this semester, we debuted Cody's Closet. So what that is if you're needing some professional attire for maybe interviewing or going to a conference or any professional networking mixer, anything, right? You can come rent free, right? So you obviously don't have to pay for this, but you're renting out clothes from us, the professional clothing too. And we have lots of different styles, from suits to skirts, from all different genders too. So we have a lot. And if you also want to donate, you can do that too. But here in the career resources too, I also just want to highlight really quickly some other web pages. I know maybe resumes and cover letters is probably the first thing we think of when we apply to jobs, right? So here on our page, you can find some key takeaways, even templates. I know those are maybe a buzzword, resume templates. Those are these two here. But here you can find other guides and tips, even resume formats, right? Because some of us are like, what does even a sample look like that I can reference from? If I just click on one for us to see, you can see for the chronological resume type, what goes in each section. And even on the next page, literally a visual sample of what it looks like, right? So I'm just going to back out of that. So again, just visually what a resume looks like, tips on how to build it concisely, right? And of course, I don't just stop there, but even interviewing, right? I like to tell students, you're applying to get invited back to the interview, right? So here in the interviewing, we even have that as far as like mock preparation tools. So here it's called Big Interview. And if you're not familiar with that, we have a whole video on instructional wise how to use it. But basically, it's a tool for you to literally have your own mock interview. Sorry, my office light just turned off. But what you're thinking about is utilizing this tool for mock interview purposes, right? And of course, we can do that too as well. So just to give you, again, a preview example, some of our services that we have when it comes to the interviewing, resume, even job searching, right? And we have a whole platform. If you're not familiar with that, I'll end it with Handshake. So to view our career fairs, see the employers that are actually coming and what positions they have available for students is all on Handshake in the events tab, as well as finding jobs to apply for on or off campus too as well. So I highly, highly, highly encourage that you do, if not already, create an account on Handshake. And also too, it's for alumni. So when you do graduate, the Career Center, along with the Alumni Center, I believe we're probably like the only centers that still assist and help with alumni once you do graduate. So Handshake is where you can find and attend alumni events too as well. But that was just a quick spiel again of the Career Center. If you have any quick questions, let me know. But other than that, thank you for your time and allowing me to talk about me or us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing that. You really got a lot into a quick introduction there. So there was a lot for everybody to think about. I really think it's so important in history. We do a lot of content, but here we're talking about form and how do you package what you've learned and who you are as a person. And so in this careers series, Careers for Historians, the kind of things that Lauren highlighted there are very, very important. And they may be what sets you apart from another candidate, is that level of professionalism, that level of polish that Lauren and her crew are ready to help you with. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks for joining us. If anybody has any questions, now's the time. Otherwise, thanks for the contact and the awareness of your crew, and everybody will know where to find you, Lauren, at the Career Center. Thank you so much. I don't want to keep you. I know this is past your. You're joining us at an awkward hour, and even your office lighting is reminding you of that.
It is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, excellent. Thank you. And I'm going to turn the floor over now in just a second to Sara Mercado, who's registrar at the San Bernardino County Museum. I'll get the lights turned on. Laura, did you want to show anything on the screen here, share screen, or
No,
you're just going
not
to?
that I'm-
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Martin. Sara Mercado, please join me in welcoming Sara. Thank you so much, Sara, for joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm the Registrar at the San Bernardino County Museum. I've been in my current role for about a little over 2 years now. Have to think about that for a second. I started off as an intern, getting my master's degree. I decided to do my internship at the San Bernardino County Museum, working with Jennifer, who's also joining with us today, in the Department of History. I did a 6-month internship there for my master's degree. Kind of volunteered on and off with the museum while working other jobs. Got a position at the front desk, worked there for about a year at the same museum. And then left, took about a year or 2 off during the pandemic, and then got offered a position as registrar. I started off as part-time and I'm now full-time. So I've kind of been lucky in the sense that I've been able to get my foot in the door at a local museum and kind of move up and grow there. Which is not always the case, and especially museum fields. They'll tell you in like any museum program, be prepared to look for jobs across the country, be prepared to move, because it's not common that you get to kind of stay close to home in this field. As registrar, I handle all of the paperwork for the collection. So that includes what we call accession records or donor records. Anytime we get a donation into the museum, or also deeds of gift. And then anytime anything leaves our collection, it's called deaccessioning. I handle that paperwork. And then anytime we get objects that are on loan from somebody else, either into the museum or we loan some of our collection out to somebody else, I handle all that paperwork as well. I work with all of the curators at our museum, which would be history, integrated biology, earth sciences, and anthropology. So I get to know all of their collections as well. Interestingly enough, I've had a chance recently to work on a couple of exhibits, which is kind of outside of my scope, but it has been a great learning experience. One thing in museums that I've learned, and you'll see if you ever look at different job applications or job postings for museums, you'll see sometimes other duties as assigned at the bottom. It can be scary because you don't know what that would mean. But it also can be a great chance to grow, like being able to do the exhibits that I just finished and one I'm currently working on. It's been a great chance to grow those skills and learn something different. Also been very challenging, but it's been fun. Anything else?
That's a good start. And then that's a lot. And I think actually the theme of when we did this series last year, we could have had a subtitle of the theme of almost all of the events, other duties as assigned. And that was a really a sort of common thing for people going on the job market. Be ready to be flexible and to
wear different hats and use a bunch of different skills you didn't know you would possibly use in a job. So
that's a great start. And maybe we can turn over to Jennifer, I think, next, and then David. Does that sound good? And then I'm sure there are going to be questions for everybody. But Jennifer, are you able to unmute there?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, definitely Sarah hit the nail on the head with the other duties as assigned. I know David was shaking his head too. We've all been there. But like Sarah said, it's kind of a blessing in disguise because you get to do more multifaceted things than what you anticipated, or at least what I anticipated. So my name's Jennifer Dickerson. I am the Curatorial Services Manager at the Museum of Riverside. That is actually something brand new. I just left the San Bernardino County Museum. My last day, was February 15th. So I am brand new at the Museum of Riverside. I actually inadvertently ended up in the museum field. So when I was listening about your career center, I was very enthralled because at least when I went for my BA, our career center was nowhere near as developed. So I would use that resource. If leave here with anything, use that resource. I was actually pre-med in undergrad and I had every intention of going to medical school. It ended up not happening for all good reasons. And I actually went back to study history and had every intention of becoming a professor and working for a 4-year university teaching history. And then I randomly got a job at a museum, at the Mission Inn Museum, if anybody's been to downtown Riverside. And my love of museums started. And it was something very happy that happened in my life. And I've been in the museum field for 14 years now. So it definitely was a surprise, but I'm glad it happened. And I'm glad that ignore my dog in the background. I'm sorry. He apparently wants to chime in too. But I didn't even think of museum work. So I started off much like Sara. I worked the front desk and did guest services. And then I became history curator and then history curator collections manager. Worked at the Mission Inn Museum for almost 6 years. And then I came to the county museum and worked there for 8 years as the history curator. So some people have preconceived notions of what museum people do and what even curators do, but it is kind of all of the above. We work on exhibits, we work together in doing programming. An added element with the county museum and with the Museum of Riverside is they're both government entities, government departments. So I was a county employee and now I am a city employee. So just thinking about that too, because museums differ greatly and you can work for a nonprofit, a for-profit, government entity. And so I can't even count the number of exhibits I've done, but it's been a fun ride and I've definitely learned so much about our local region. And Sara will also tell you, we cannot tell you how many objects we have cataloged or put onto our database, all for the public to enjoy. And each museum has its own mission statement, so its own goal to serve its community. But usually that entails serving the community, providing information. And I say this time and time again, we can't do it without volunteers. We can't do it without interns. So sincerely, if this is of any interest to you, the second thing I'll leave you with is consider volunteering. I can guarantee you won't regret it. And you'll have some experience, but you'll get a better sense of what working in a museum is like.
Thank you, Jennifer. David, please jump in.
Yeah, thank you. So I am David Myers. I'm the director of the San Bernardino County Museum. For those that don't know, we have 2 museums and 5 historic sites across the county, from Chino to Oro Grande. So it's a large museum system that's within the county. I have been with the museum almost a decade. I've served in several roles within the museum, including curator of visitor engagement and exhibits when I first came in, and Jennifer Dickerson was my mentor as I came into the museum, and many a day were spent sitting at the front desk wondering why I got a master's degree in the first place. So when they talk about other duties as assigned, that is a fact. I was also a chief deputy. I was an interim director, and now I'm a director. Museums are kind of in public history. So I have a master's in public history, a BA in organizational leadership, and so museums and public history were both kind of a second profession for me, a second career for me. I started in healthcare education. Actually, I was an educator for children and adults in a healthcare setting in the Midwest. And I decided I wanted to continue teaching, and I had a love for history, a passion for history already. And so, of course, like everybody else in the world, I wanted to teach social studies. At that time in my area, social studies programs were imploding. Nobody was getting hired. I don't know what it's like now, so don't be terrified if that's your major. So I decided to kind of pivot, and I looked around and I saw public history, and I had no idea what that was, what that term meant. But I did some research and I decided, hey, I like, old stuff and I like playing with it. So sign me up. And 15 years later, here we are. Public history and museums are a real passion of mine. I believe in public service through public history. So I really believe at our core, we're impacting communities, improving the way of life in our communities, making our communities better places to live. That's something I'm really passionate about and our county is really passionate about. Um, I think somebody mentioned the ability to relocate. And for me, that was really important. There are plenty of museum jobs out there. There are plenty of history jobs out there. They may not be in your backyard. For me, I'm from the Midwest, the Cincinnati, Ohio area. Plenty of museums there, but not for the amount of graduates they were turning out. I moved to Nashville first. And then from Nashville, I moved to Southern California, kind of chasing these jobs. And certainly I've been privileged to be able to do that, and not everybody can. But if you can, it takes a real burden off of you. So I encourage you to broaden your scope as far as jobs that you're looking at. Look outside of kind of our region and think about where you might be willing to go. And then just getting your foot in the door is so incredibly important. Every career, obviously, but museums even more so because there's a lot of competition. And so you really have to distinguish yourself from other folks. So volunteer, intern, work on special projects. I think Sara Mercado who's with you today, is a wonderful example of that, just persistence, working hard to get her foot in the door and working her way up. And she was pretty humble about it, but that story is pretty incredible. Her ability to work herself from an intern to a full-fledged curator registrar. She did it, and so it's very possible. And our museum specifically, it's growing. We went from, I don't know, 15 staff a decade ago, and we're going to be about 25 staff now. We will continue to offer positions, but like Jen said, volunteer, put yourself out there, call our staff. We're all on the websites. It's easy to contact us. We work for the county, so we expect those calls. So we want to be a resource for folks. And lastly, I think I heard your fantastic Career Center rep, talking about all of those amazing resources. And I echo Jen's thoughts that those are incredible resources and super important. So really take advantage of them. I don't know if my school didn't offer them or I was just lazy, but I should have. And you're lucky to get those. But one thing, so I do interviews all the time, and my staff interview people. And what I would say is enthusiasm beats expertise all the time. So obviously, when you go on a job interview, there has to be some level of basic understanding of the job and ability to do it. But if you're enthusiastic in that interview and you're showing why you're passionate about history, public history, museums, education, any of those things, that can beat out somebody who is an expert in the field, but maybe less passionate. And so I really encourage people to get enthusiastic about the job and to show it.
Thank you, David and Jennifer and Sarah, for some initial remarks. We can continue to chat. I don't see any questions coming up now, so I'm going to quickly pull rank and ask a quick one. And that is about the nitty-gritty of this. And you said call. And I wonder if that's a deliberate distinction between calling and emailing. Do you think the actual call is a better way to inquire and to find out more about any kind of volunteer opportunities or intern opportunities, or the email? Do you think both are a good way forward, or any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say from my end, both are a perfectly acceptable way forward. For me, you may get a quicker response if you email.
Okay.
I'm at the office all the time, but I have my email with me where my office phone doesn't follow me. So from my perspective, I would be great either way. I know from our educator's perspective, who runs the volunteer program, we have a whole kind of online process for signing up to be a volunteer, and there's kind of a process that you go through, but she welcomes both calls and emails as well.
And I'd love to follow up a little bit about how specifically we go through that, and I can share both of your institutions' websites. And I'll also ask Jennifer, David, and Sarah to share with me some websites, just to make sure that I share those out with our students when we share this video, to make sure they know where to go to find more about internship and volunteer opportunities, so that they know what doors to knock on and what emails. Elise, you were gonna jump in with a question. Can I see you, please?
I had a question, like, what is your average, like, normal day? Like, what skills do you utilize, like, just an average boring day for each of you?
Average boring day. I don't know if there's such a thing, at least for me, not right now. For me, it's talking with people. I talk with people on the phone all the time who want to donate things. Being able to communicate whether or not we want an object to somebody, and then, computer skills, I deal with a database on a daily basis. Excel's a big thing for me right now. And then being able to write a professional email, is another thing. We communicate a lot by email. A lot of things are done via email. That way we have paper chain, things can't get lost. You can't lose a Post-it note with somebody's phone number on it if you have an email. Being organized is a big one for me as well. I do hold all the records, so in my position, being organized, making sure you know where things are at is huge.
For me, as Curatorial Services Manager, I oversee all the curators. The Museum of Riverside has, similarly to the County of San Bernardino, curators for different divisions. So there's an anthropology curator, a history curator, and a natural sciences curator. And so I oversee all of those curators, as well as the education curator, who does things like educational programming for exhibits that are opening. The Museum of Riverside's a little different in that it's technically closed to the public currently, and it'll reopen by 2026 with new exhibits. So a lot of time is being spent currently developing exhibits that they want open, and then also developing programs throughout the city of Riverside in different locations. So that's mostly currently what we're working on is programs, upcoming exhibits, and essentially this position would be like an assistant director position.
So my job used to be a lot more fun than it is now. When I was curator of visitor engagement and exhibits, we were developing exhibits, developing the interpretive plan and strategic planning, assisting with programs, looking at objects, education, all of those things. Now, since I've transitioned into more of an administrative role, it's lots and lots of emails, budgets, agreements, contracts, dealing with our county council and our county policies. I'm both a conduit from the county to our 25-person team, as well as to the county from our team. So I'm kind of that middleman in between both parties. The interesting thing about county work is that there are many things that require board approval. For instance, if we have a new agreement to take on a grant over $10,000, that has to be board approved. And that involves creating an agenda item to go to the board and to get board approval at their public board meeting. So that kind of the bureaucracy and red tape that's inherent in government is something interesting that I never realized I would have to deal with or work through. But it's been a real challenge that's actually been fun and interesting and test my skill set. So the average day is lots and lots of emails.
And just to kind of add one more thing that I was thinking about that we all kind of touched on is being able to work with each other, being able to work with different people of different work styles. All of our curators have their specialty in their divisions. Being able to come together to create an exhibit or being able to come together whenever needed to help with a program that for some reason now has 3,000 attendees that we weren't expecting. Just being able to work together to accomplish the common goal that we have. So we use on a daily basis.
Thanks, Sarah. Mason? And then others, if you have a question online, you can either raise your hand or go ahead and put it into the chat. And anybody else, go ahead.
So I have a question. So is it better to do an internship? Is it better to take an internship after your master's or before it?
For me, I wish I would have done an internship sooner. Personally, I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology and my master's is in historical administration or museum studies. I didn't really get to do much volunteering or internships during my undergrad. So the one internship that I was able to do was technically it was after my master's or part of my master's. Honestly, any experience you can get at any time is beneficial, whether it's before or after, whether it's volunteering or interning. It helps you to, get a feel for what you may be doing. I wanted to be a curator for the longest time. And now I get to still do a little bit of that, but at the same time, I found out that a lot of curator work, some of it, not quite my style. And I didn't really get to know that until after, which is fine because I'm very happy where I landed now. I love my job. I love dealing behind the scenes with paperwork. It's great. But I mean, I don't think there is a better time. Probably earlier, the better if we had to choose. That way you can kind of start building those networks.
Yeah, do it sooner rather than later. And part of that internship process is also figuring out what you like and what you don't like. So the sooner you figure it out, that piece out, the better.
Was a question, it looked like it was asking about the museum certificate, whether that's a good idea to get a museum.
Will it help get a
Studies.
museum job by completing the museum certificate here at school?
Museum studies certificates, that's a set of specific classes that'll be with folks like Professor Tom Long and Daisy Ocampo who are trained specifically in museum studies.
Sure. Yeah, it absolutely could. No job is ever guaranteed for any set of credentials, and we all find that out at some point in our career. But yeah, the more focusing you can have on the museum world, certainly the better.
Thanks for these questions. I know there's a lot more I'd like to ask about. Before I full rank, I want to invite everybody in our Zoom attendance crowd and everybody here. If you have questions, please jump in. I like the real nitty gritty of some of these things in terms of the actual hiring process. Thinking about this idea of enthusiasm over expertise. That's a good thing to remember when you get out there. And that's the sort of polish also the performance in an interview and that kind of thing. Okay, I vamped for long enough and we have a question in the chat.
Okay, it says, in all the years collectively you've all had in museums, what different titles have you had? And how big is networking in terms of getting foot in the door or jobs?
Sarah,
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. So I was an intern in the history department. I was front desk guest services, part-time registrar, and then full-time registrar. So I haven't had too many titles. Networking for me was kind of a big thing, and kind of being the squeaky wheel, as David and Jennifer will attest to. I, even working at the front desk, never kind of let it go that I wanted to be back working with collections, and that was my end goal. I, was very enthusiastic, that's where my passion was, and still is. And so I kind of just kept pushing forward. I mean, sometimes can be defeating when you have a master's degree and you're working a part-time guest services job. But when you have that goal in sight and you have the right network, I talk with the curators, when David was a curator, I talked with him, I talked with the director at the time when I was coming up, and I went to a conference and met up with all of them and kind of networked outside of the museum at a conference, which I encourage everybody to try to go to in whatever field you're looking into. So networking, especially in the museum field, is huge, for what I feel.
I agree. I think regardless of what level or what year you are, whether you're undergrad or graduate student, again, like it's not too late, first of all, to get experience. It's not too early to get experience. I have worked with some individuals that are as early as high school or middle school, and they knew they wanted to work in museums, and just working in different areas, they kind of fleshed out. By the time they got to grad school, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I've had people who haven't even set foot in a museum until grad school. So again, I think whenever you get a chance, I would definitely at least make connections to individuals and ask questions. I'm really lucky, again, with the county museum to have had people who were very interested in working with the history curator, and at least with the county museum, that ranged from working in archives and having photographs digitized, to working with artifacts, to working at 2 different museum sites, or even doing historic site work. And so I think by networking, by volunteering, by doing internships, you kind of get an idea of the different faces of museums. And then you can also, like Sarah had mentioned earlier, you can do it locally. If you could also do work remotely for museums that are far away, or even if you have the time to travel, for example, for like a summer internship, it definitely doesn't hurt. So I definitely recommend, if museums are at all interesting to you, definitely get your foot in the door, even if it's becoming a docent or a tour guide, and then working from there, because you learn a lot from different fields. So whether you work in education or history or earth sciences, they all have different things they can teach you.
Yeah, same answer. Networking is huge. My first real museum job came because the city manager who was hiring for it was an alumnus of my undergraduate program, and specifically sought out a graduate of the public history graduate program. And then I ended up at the top of that list because I had worked directly with the public history program director on a few different projects, so he recommended me for that job. So the dots all connected. As far as the question, I've been chief deputy, curator, interim director, historical consultant, and director.
Thanks, Shazania, for that question and everybody for the answers. I think we're getting some really good guidance on next steps in terms of these volunteerships and also the internships. And I am gonna ask after our session, I'll follow up with Jennifer, David and Sarah about where you should go to find those offerings. Is there ever a situation where somebody comes to you cold and says, I'd like to do an internship or volunteer at this museum, and they haven't even looked at what is on offer? And Sarah, you're an example of that?
Kind of, yeah. So I had been to the county museum when I was younger. Of course, by the time I was in grad school, it had changed a lot because it had come underneath the new staff. But I was like, I went there when I was 10. Let's give it a shot. Let's reach out to a curator and see if I can get an internship. The procedures now changed since then. That was in 2017. But I just sent an email to Jennifer and was like, hey, I don't know if you guys do this, but can I do an internship? And so that's kind of how I got started there.
How unusual is that, Jennifer and David? And how unusual is it for that to be respectively to be a fit?
In my experience, it definitely is not unusual. With the county, we have agreements with certain schools. I'm not sure, David, you can refresh my memory. It's either 9 or 10 schools that we have an agreement with where we can actually do internships with and give essentially what students would get as course credit. So like Sarah mentioned, we changed it slightly, but when I was at the county, I still got contacted directly from students. Primarily though, we kind of funnel all that through our education division now. But again, that doesn't stop people from being able to, email Sarah as the registrar or email our natural sciences or earth sciences curator or our biology curator. One of us, and even if they email David as the director, one of us would get you to the right person. So
Yeah, I always say most of our staff are kind of academics, and academics love to show off. So they're, and nobody ever asks them to. So that's why they love it. They want to share resources. They want to talk about the projects they've been doing. They want to bring you on board. So yeah, I mean, the danger is if you call us, we may make you come volunteer for us.
That's great. And I like that. I will ask for those resources to share out, but also taking that initiative of making that first call sounds like a really good idea as well. And we do have another question about what exactly a curator of public history does. I guess a curator in a museum setting or a curator in a different setting, but question from Charles.
So I was a public historian. I wasn't curator of public history. I was an exhibit curator, but my graduate degree is in public history, which is the preservation and interpretation of history for a public audience. So if you're doing history work in an academic setting, you might be an academic historian. If you're doing history that is aimed at a public audience, then you're doing public history work. And obviously there's a ton of overlap between the both or between the two. And there are a lot of public historians out there that might not consider themselves public historians at all. I accept the title. I'll take it. I don't have any beef with the academic historians. But that's, yeah, so if you're doing history with an intended audience, an intended public audience, that's public history.
and oftentimes public historians, again, like David was saying, it depends on the institution. Each institution will have slight variances or, more people. So if they have more positions available. So there are institutions that have like a public historian. And oftentimes they, like the County of Riverside, for example, has public historians. And a major part of their job is oral histories. So capturing oral histories or interviews with local peoples on different topics. So again, it kind of goes back to where you're applying, where you're networking, where you're interning. That public historian might have a slightly different, like not meaning, but different to-dos depending on which institution you go to.
Thanks, both. Do you want to read off the next?
Yeah, the next one says, their question is for David. My goal is to be a director of a museum. What have been some challenges you have faced and how did you overcome them?
Oh, boy. Well, internal challenges, I think, are always the biggest and probably the hardest to overcome. With that is a lot of self-doubt, a lot of imposter syndrome. I've certainly experienced, as I know a lot of folks in museums have experienced. I think all the time to myself, how did they, why did they let me be in charge? You gave me a $4 million budget? That doesn't make any sense. Who would do that? And so I think building your confidence and moving past that initial self-doubt is really important. It's been really important for me. And to do that, I think a lot of times you have to rely on the people around you. I said Jennifer was a mentor. She absolutely was. I rely on our team of amazing professionals constantly. And Sara Mercado, I called her the other day, 5 o'clock at 4:30, to bring some pedestals and an emergency at the Colton Area Museum, and she was there within 20 minutes. So I think, relying on your team and their expertise. Beyond that, it's finding the right fit, finding a place where you're going to be comfortable and where you might be okay being uncomfortable for a while, because that's what growth is. That's what, to become a leader, you have to occasionally be uncomfortable, but you have to find yourself in the right situation. And that's what this museum was for me. I think a lot of the staff who came in 2014 through 2016 kind of experienced the same thing. It was kind of a chance to put our mark on a museum that was kind of in the middle of this process of refining itself. And that was an exciting opportunity. And I didn't go into it with the idea that I was going to be director by any means, and it just kind of sort of worked out that way. And I'm excited and happy that it did. And the other piece, I think finally, there have been a lot of challenges, but I would say it's much easier to change your work style to accommodate a team than it is to change the team's work style. So when I first came in, and Jennifer may be able to attest to this, I kind of was asking curators to bend to my work style as far as exhibit development. And I quickly found out that just wasn't going to work. I had to change how I worked with each one of those curators. And that I found that to be much easier.
Guys, question. What are the kind of things you look for when you hire someone?
What was that question? Sorry.
What are the kind of things you guys look for when hiring someone?
Certainly, again, enthusiasm. Are you passionate about the work? Work style. I think it's super important, and it's something we don't talk about enough as we're preparing people for jobs, is how they're going to fit into the culture of the organization. And so, coming into the interview with an understanding of not just the job responsibilities and the job duties and education and kind of all of those things that we all script out for an interview, but also trying to understand what that work culture is and kind of shaping yourself to that and showing how you're going to be a good collaborator, a good partner on projects. Because museum work, although we're all introverts, is incredibly collaborative. So if you think you're going to hide in your office all day with your archives, you're not going to. So really showing how you're going to get along with your coworkers, how you're going to meet deadlines, tackle big projects, and be enthusiastic about those things at the same time.
One big thing for me going into interviews was asking questions of the organization, having questions prepared. That way you get to know them better. They're asking about you, so you can ask about them. Maybe you go into a job interview and you find that that organization is not a good fit for you. But unless you ask those questions, you may not know that. And if you get stuck at a, you know, in a position where you're not happy, the culture is not what you wanted or not what you thought, it's always good to ask those questions in that interview phase.
It's a great point, and that issue of fit that I think that David and Jennifer and Sarah all have brought up is really, really important as well. It comes up again and again in these sort of sessions. And to know whether you're a fit sometimes requires going into an interview with some questions, because most interviews I've been in also at some point say, you know, is there anything you'd like to ask of us? And if they're met with sort of a blank stare, then that might be interpreted as somebody who doesn't know anything about their organization. So you can really be a hotshot, but you demonstrate a level of care about the position you're going into if you've done just a little bit of preliminary research about Bashar, and then we have a couple questions.
My addition to it is like, find something that you can relate to their work. Find something on their website or something that you want to be involved in. So like, for example, how I interviewed here and I got the job, I was like, I like this program and I want to be involved with it because I'm passionate about this and that. So I feel like that's a very effective way to impress the people that you're interviewing with, for sure.
Yeah, and the enthusiasm, that's great.
Absolutely. We pass on the most credentialed people, the best credentialed people all the time. It often comes down to fit, enthusiasm, putting yourself out there.
Agreed. And I think by asking those questions, like as an interviewee, that shows us as interviewers, like we're there listening and we're like, okay, well, they did their homework. They read about the museum, what we're doing. And that, like you were just saying, that completely changes, at least for me, when I'm interviewing people. Oh, no, they want to be here. And I think it makes a big difference. So yeah, I agree.
One of the questions in the chat says, as many of you mentioned, you switched from your previous degrees to get a degree in history that helped you get the job you have now. From your own experiences, does the field of history you research affect your ability to work in a museum?
Well, speaking from personal experience, like I mentioned, I was pre-med. I actually was pre-med throughout my whole 4 years as an undergrad. But I changed my major my second year to classical civilization to actually be more competitive for med school. It was something a counselor had suggested to me. So I studied the ancient Greeks and Romans, whereas that field is very niche. Museum field's already niche as it is, but ancient civilizations are very, very niche. And typically, if you want to work for somewhere like the Getty Villa, you have to have a PhD. And so, as if you're going to be that sort of curator, so if you're going to be a curator for an institution that, like the Getty, they typically focus on people who have PhDs in certain areas. So I think it just depends on what institutions you're looking at. I stopped after my master's, and again, my master's was in history, it was not in public history. And as funny as this is going to sound, my master's was in colonial American history. So I had intention of going to the East Coast and working on the East Coast. But I ended up working, like I mentioned, in the Mission Inn Museum and then at the San Bernardino County Museum and now Riverside. And so I learned local history, not through a university. And I don't know if that's typical. Usually when you go to study and, for example, you want to be a history curator, you do typically want to study whatever you're going to curate. But again, it just depends. And oftentimes it depends on the college, and sometimes community colleges or like local colleges like UCR or Cal State San Bernardino, and they'll have local history classes. Not all colleges offer that. So it just depends on where you're looking, what kind of curator you're looking to be, and things of that nature.
I don't want to keep our guests too far past the bottom of the hour. We've asked you here for an hour. And yet I also want to make sure that all of our questions get asked, as long as our guests can stick around for just a little bit longer. Do you want to present this?
So it says, Jennifer, you mentioned a bit of public history as a degree. Do you feel there is a big difference in terms of a MA in history versus public history when it comes to curatorial work?
So that's a good question. David and I have talked about this a lot, and Sarah and I have also talked about this a lot. My degree, both bachelor's and then my MA, solely focus on history, classical civilization. So I was not a public historian. But I feel like, again, it depends on the institution you're going towards. So specifically, if you are going to need to do research, being in just a history major helps you develop those skills of researching, which really helps not only just in general researching collections, but also helps in researching for exhibits. And so that background helped a lot in that regard of my job, and, you know, putting on exhibits, working with different community members in those regards. David could speak more to like public history, and I know Sarah, museum studies and things like that. So again, it just depends on the institution and what you're feeling. I, in the past, have wished that I at least got the credential in public history. It helps with determining what museums do, exhibits, things of that nature. So if you know you want to be in the museum field, I think public history is helpful. But again, usually institutions will offer either an MA or a PhD in public history, or an MA in history. And then again, you can get like a certificate or something of that nature in public history.
Yeah, and I think it depends on, part of it also depends on the program. My public history program, a lot of them like to talk about you're a historian first and a public historian second. But my public history program was very much an applied public history program. We were in the trenches learning how to catalog and shape plexi and develop exhibits and all of those kinds of very much those applied things, and much less history theory. In fact, when I got to a PhD program, I was terrified because I knew so little of theory. So yeah, it really just depends. If you're more interested in specific curation, like Jen said, history all the way. If you're more interested in kind of, if you're open to things like education and exhibits and things like that, then public history might be the way to go.
Next one says, is there any Native American curators in the local museums?
Definitely. So in the sense, so it's kind of both ways. There are curators who are Native American, and then there are curators who focus on Native American or indigenous cultures. So for example, at the San Bernardino County Museum, we have an anthropology curator, and over the years it changed. There's anthropology, like cultural anthropology, and also archaeology, and then those ended up being kind of under the same umbrella as anthropology. And very similar to the City of Riverside Museum, at one point there was like an archaeologist and then an anthropologist, but that kind of morphed in under the same umbrella as anthropology.
I think we've got, in just a minute, we can let our guests go, but I want to open the floor one more time for any questions. I think we packed a lot of really, this seemed to fly by. I don't know if I'm the only one here, but this hour really flew by with so much, a combination of big overview, counsel and advice, and some really great nitty gritty. I'm going to follow up with our guests to get some links to some resources that I will share out with those who are interested in terms of volunteer, internship and employment opportunities. But I hope that you've all gotten as much as I have out of this. I've really enjoyed it very, very much. Please join me in a thank you to our guests for joining. Today, and that's an applause. I didn't know if that was a raised hand or an applause in Zoom land from Manuel. Jennifer, David, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for making the time to join us. This has really been terrific, and I think it's been really greatly beneficial for our guests. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us here in person as well. Sarah got dibs on a free book. I've got books here from our faculty, and I'll resend that to you all. I sent it in the last note, David and Jennifer, and I'll resend that. And I missed Lauren, but from Professor Gutierrez Remind, from Professor Johnson and Professor Robinson here, and I'll resend those to you all. And if you have a top pick, I'm gonna throw that in the mail for you. And with the option to get it signed by the author, because I know where to find them. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I hope to continue to collaborate with you in terms of empowering and enriching our student opportunities here. So thank you very much.
I'm going to jump in really quick. I'm sorry, don't hate me. But Lauren mentioned going to conferences. Museums are amazing for conferences. You can look up different organizations. What's really neat this year is the California Association of Museums. Their annual conference is going to be in Long Beach, and it's in March. So I think if anybody's even the least bit interested, you can see new museum trends. We go to conferences to keep up with what museums are currently doing and how to reach audiences. But it's a great way to network. It's a great way to find internships, a great way to find volunteerships. And again, it's usually in California somewhere, and this year just happens to be really close in Long Beach. But there's also the National Museum Organization, AAM, or if you're specifically looking for history, AASLH. But definitely, I think if anybody's interested, go and check out CAM, even for a day. And again, it's in March, so I would definitely recommend that.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I will ask you all for links and that kind of thing. And so in my follow-up email, I'll ask for any links to share out with the crew when I share out the recordings, but that's really helpful. Mason, you had a last question?
I was asking if the conference is in weekends or weekdays.
So typically they run, I think it's like Wednesday through Sunday or Thursday through Sunday for the most part. Every conference is different. Some may start on Monday with pre-conference workshops, things like that. But typically they are at some point during the week, with a lot of them going into the weekend.
Great.
This one is going to be the 10th through the 13th, which is Sunday through Wednesday.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll share some more materials after I hit up our guests for those links and any other materials that you'd like to share. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and shut down this Zoom because then we've got our a follow-up seminar with our MA crew here. So to those who are logging back on, please hop back on as soon as I shut this.
No, I already. Okay.